Hey guys, this is Riley with our next type interview. Today we'll be interviewing Jack, who is the first SP that we will be interviewing. He's an ISFP, one of my favorite types. Um,
And I know you guys were just like begging for me to come back. You know, your typical ENTJ. Those comments blew up for me. So here
yeah,
I am for round two.
we have your favorite ENTJ over here, Cody.
Dilly dilly.
But what we'd like to start with is something that's very important for ISFPs, which is to have a fulfilling workplace and somewhere where they can do meaningful work. So we're going to introduce Jack and him talking about what makes a fulfilling workplace or fulfilling work, or what kind of environment is best for you personally as an ISFP.
Oh yeah, definitely. So me personally, I really value a structured work environment. For an example, right now I work at Discount Tire, and it's one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. Management is great there. There's a standard procedures for everything you do, so you almost never have a question. It's always you just follow the whole lineup of what needs to be done. Also, another big thing for me is the camaraderie or whatever we have in the workplace. Everyone, we're all friends. We all work hard. Like, there's no one on the team that slacks, because if they do, they get cut or they get a mouthful from one of us. And so everyone's always putting out, very structured. We all have rules, and
Okay.
yeah, I just love the leadership.
So it has a lot to do with mutual respect and a structured work environment where people are valued based on the type of contribution that they make, stuff like that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. With that, I guess we'll just segue into the cognitive functions, and we'll start off with introverted feeling, which is linked to your moral compass, basically your feeling of validation. Actually, I have a lot of envy for people who have a lot of FI, actually, because as an INTP, they don't actually typically have they don't put a lot of self-worth on themselves.
No, they don't.
So it'd be interesting to hear how you experience your sense of validation, your self-worth, your moral compass. How do you experience that cognitive function in particular?
So me personally, I think the big word was definitely moral compass. Whenever I go to make any sort of decision, the first thing I always go to is my moral compass. If it doesn't align with my moral compass, I don't do it. If it does align with my moral compass, it's I go all out for it. So if I believe it's morally correct, it's just I put all my effort and everything I have towards it, and yeah.
Okay. So, would you say that does it ever take the approach of being kind of condemning of other people morally, or do you feel like it's more just personal in that you don't necessarily have so many moral condemnation of other people?
I'll definitely say, I have grown and matured over the years. Definitely when I was younger, if I saw someone acting, thinking, or making decisions that I didn't find to be moral based off my own moral compass,
Right.
I just viewed them as lower or less, or someone who can't make good decisions. Obviously there is a logical side to things. Not everything is morally and mostly driven.
Right.
But yeah, still, it's hard kind of, working with people who are only logic based as someone opposed to me who's only moral based.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a difficulty there, but
I definitely get that. And that's, I think, where the stereotype comes from of types with FI here are always silently judging people or morally condemning people. Maybe not publicly, but they have a sense of, I don't know, just condemnation for other people's behavior sometimes.
Elitism.
Which Kind of brings in like the nemesis function, which is extroverted feeling. And like you said, as you've gotten older, you're less likely to morally condemn someone. Do you think that has a lot to do with developing empathy for other people's situations and stuff like that?
So, based on my experience, I wouldn't say it's like empathy. Personally, I don't really care about those other people.
Yeah.
But I will say, I mean, what it comes down to is being able to get the job done effectively. And as I've grown and matured and like become less polarized, there are like there are other right answers to things, and it's not like necessarily morally based. Sometimes you're in a tough situation, and you got to do what makes sense more so than what feels right. So that's kind of where I've grown.
I have a question for you with that. It's just like, so if somebody were to explain their feelings behind something, would that make you more understanding behind it? Like if they were like, I felt hurt in that moment, I felt like this.
Oh, yeah.
Then you'd be able to be like, oh, yeah, I get that completely. And I can't condemn it as much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I understand where someone's like from a feeling point of view, if I understand where they're coming from, I can relate to it more, and I'm more likely to help them and work with them. Whereas if someone just comes to me logically and it's just like, know this, know that, or something, but it's just like, well, it's still kind of messed up in my head. It's just like, I'm not going to fight them as much as I did before, but I am going to write them off. And when it does come to another decision-making situation, I'm probably going to take them off to the side of decision making or just kind of disregard them.
That makes sense. It sounds like it's almost more of like a rationale kind of thing. Like, what is the point of morally condemning people? Like, you got to get along, you got to get or keep things going, stuff like that.
Yep.
Kind of along those lines.
At the end of the day, job's got to get done. So
yeah, that makes sense. Which is a nice segue into the next cognitive function, which is extroverted sensing parent function. It's linked with physical awareness, adaptivity, and being able to provide people with experience, something that you take pride in, and I don't know, just doing hard work that you're aren't necessarily like overly proud of, not arrogant about, but just something that you personally take a lot of care to do properly.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd probably say what I'd have to, like, my answer to that would be definitely like work ethic. Like, work ethic is huge to me. It's not something that, like you said, I'm not necessarily proud of or like try to flaunt or, show off to other people.
Right.
Because to me, it's a necessity. Like, if you're given a job to do, the job isn't done until it's done well. That's, a huge thing to me. And if the job's not done well or the job isn't complete, like, you're not done working yet.
Right.
And I take that to pretty much every kind of scenario and work environment that I end up in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually had the pleasure of working with an ISTP who also has extroverted sensing parent, and that was definitely his type of attitude. If I ever had any kind of complaint, it was just like, fell flat. It didn't matter. Like, you just gotta keep going. Like, I don't have any sympathy really for you. I'm not gonna tell you anything. Like, yep, that's the way it is, man. Sorry.
It's a very simplistic kind of just like not even go with the flow, but just like, this is the way it is. This is what I have to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say, it's really grounded. Like, it doesn't put up with like a lot of BS, I guess, which kind of has to do with introverted intuition, child function too, making it so that you have any blind spot where things of more metaphysical or abstract quality don't really mean as much because of the way your functions are aligned. It's more of just like what is actually happening like right now. Like, it doesn't so much matter all this theory and other BS. I don't know if that resonates at all, but
I mean, a little bit, yeah. I mean, if we're definitely diving into the child function, that kind of stuff. I mean, when I get in kind of tricky situations, I don't tend to worry as much. I mean, I'm very keen on like building my skills, mastering my skills, and things like that. To where when I do get in a sketchy situation, I don't think or panic because those skills are so like ingrained in me that I just. Like that sketchy situation, you just kind of like ride through it. I mean, you're so prepared that you just surf the wave, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's like you don't really get anxious about a difficult situation that you might confront.
It's actually kind of calming. Like when I was working as an EMT, like blood and guts everywhere, like people are dying, you know.
Wow.
I don't know. I mean, I practiced really good in class. I mean, it's just like you just get in your zone. You don't panic. You don't freak out. You just put them back together, and life is good. Maybe not for them, but they'll get there eventually.
That's
so
cool. That's cool. I definitely admire that quality for sure. Yeah. So, I guess we're just gonna segue to introverted intuition, child, and that obviously involves extroverted sensing too. They're kind of linked. So, how do you experience your introverted intuition, which is kind of linked with planning and being able to navigate situations pretty easily and confidently, like you just explained? I guess more on the goal-oriented side, how do you experience your planning and your resolutions to yourself and things like that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I don't plan a whole lot. I mean, I like my main focus is what I'm doing, like right here and right now, and mastering what I'm doing right here and right now. Because I mean, whatever happens in the future, it will be a result of what I'm doing here and now. And yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, when I get in a tricky situation, it's not about how much I planned for it. It's how much I've, done mastering myself, that when I get to those tough situations, it just happens to go well.
Right. Okay.
You're freaking liquid luck, man. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
I really don't. I feel like NI and ISFPs. It's like, I know a couple INFPs too, and it's just like things just work out. Like I have a coworker who's an INFP. Actually, do they have an child? I might be wrong about that. Anyways, you are just extremely lucky in situations that don't make sense.
That is very true. That is very true.
So, in terms of your goals, I don't know. How do you envision your goals then? Like, do you have a general, straightforward goal? You said you don't necessarily like planning that much, but how do you?
Experience goal setting.
Yeah.
Yeah, goal setting is something that's tough for me. It just doesn't make sense because like planning for the future and all that. I mean, you can spend a whole day planning, and the day after that, life could be completely different. Like you never know. So I don't really see the logic in like really future planning.
Okay.
I mean, I have a general idea of what I want out of life, and so based on what I want, that's what I do in the here and now, and that's what I do for the day. And I mean, all you got to worry about is today, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and that's kind of how I go through life.
You do take some future steps too, though.
Occasionally, but I mean, it's nothing like you. I mean, it's a lot more of like kind of a broad spectrum. My
NI is a lot more responsible, and so I think that's why it goes out longer. But you do have the ability to just kind of hunker down and get something done, or like get to a certain goal, or not even like you talk a lot about being in the day and the moment, and you always are, but there are times where you kind of get into the joy of like say when you're meal planning or something like that, because there are times when you try to get like a meal plan and you almost revel or enjoy the idea of like what the future could look like in that area, almost like a childlike wonder.
Yeah.
But based on what you said, I always fail. So like, so I mean,
based on what I say, how do
give
I
it like a week and then I'm pretty much toast. So just like, it's a great idea to think about how beautiful the future could be. But if I'm not doing it in the present moment, you can basically like piss it away, like, you know.
I think that shows some of that childlike wonder, though. I think that's more what I'm getting at. Is
That's
that like
probably
you
a fair-
really genuinely enjoy like planning like
Yeah.
a trip, or like, you know, when you were trying to go to Florida.
Yeah.
And then you were like, you were really enjoying that mindset, and then it just never happened.
No, it didn't. It took. I planned it. I planned to change my life and like move out to Florida, get a new job.
Right.
A couple years back, and I was really good at pulling it together. Like I had a whole plan in like
You even
a
went
little
and
over
visited.
like a week and a half, and pretty instantaneously it all fell apart. Like it didn't work out. It just ended up costing me a bunch of money. Not really because I had bad planning. I don't know. It just didn't work out. But, you know,
Yeah.
that's the whole thing. You just kind of go with the flow, you know. It's just you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So you just move on.
I kind of get what you're. I think what I'm getting from this is like you have like an idea of an ideal future that you would want, but since you have extroverted sensing over introverted intuition, you more just try to align like your daily actions and what you're doing in the present with what you're just trying to align that with the general future and the general goal that you would like to reach, more than actually thinking about the goal for the sake of thinking about the goal.
That's a good
Yeah.
description.
It's more action focused, like action comes before the plan, or well, not before the plan always, but you know, it's more important what you're doing than the plan itself.
Yeah, and I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head on that one. So,
Okay,
yeah.
awesome.
You probably hate this. You're like dying on the inside right now.
Why am I dying?
If you would just,
Bro, I'm just vibing
you
along.
plan so much and like, all
Well,
that
I
crap.
do, but it's not like I
You got like the
fault
next
you.
20 years of your life figured out, and I'm just like,
the
today
th-
is vibing, dude.
The
Like,
thing that I've learned though with that is just like it can crumble in a half second, like
Yeah.
you said, and
Yeah.
that's something I think I had to learn more so than you, because you just like intuitively knew that already.
Yeah.
Like that was just something ingrained in you. That's something I had to learn. So
fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a perfectly valid and
Yeah,
good way of
agreed.
looking at the world. But I guess I
think
don't
it's
know if you want to talk any more about this, but what kind of thing would lead your planning to collapse? Like what kind of thing would
That's a good
cause it to
Like
to
to
go
either
out the
give up on a
window?
goal or just like,
yeah, to an extent, yeah. Or like, did you see unforeseen circumstances in the moment that made you not want to go through with it? Is that kind of how that would work?
no,
or-
I mean, I would say like, especially based on my personality, I mean, like, unforeseen circumstances are expected. Like, that's just all kind of part of it. But I will say, like, as far as like, you know, if I ever get in a situation where like I want to give up on a goal or like I just stop pursuing it, it all comes back to like the reason why. So like if I am doing something and in the current moment or in the current day I can't really come up with a good reason why I'm doing it, then I just kind of give up on the goal. And that's why
Okay.
I'm kind of sporadic and like things seem like they come and go so much. I mean,
Right.
I think that comes back to introverted feeling at least a little
Yeah.
bit, and just the sense that it's like if it doesn't feel like where you're supposed to be going, it just kind of like
yeah.
it takes a back seat to that, and that makes sense
Yeah.
with how the cognitive functions are stacked.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. I don't know. When something like that was to happen, does that affect your inferior function? Like, does that affect your
T.
status, like your reputation? Like, is that something that you next get worried about if something like that were to happen? Good
So, I
question.
mean, that actually is a good question. I have like basically two answers for it. I mean, it does kind of depend on the goal.
Right.
But sometimes, you know, it's just, you know, screw it. You know, it's just like I can't really find a reason of why I'm doing this. So then almost instantaneously I can switch and then move on to something else. There are other situations to where, you know, when I don't have that reason anymore and I do fail, I take it extremely hard. I feel that, you know, like My family and my friends, that, you know, everyone sees me as a failure. They see me as someone who can't follow through. And it
I'm not laughing. I literally just joked.
it's like, dang, man, I'm opening up here. Like,
Your
oh
family
gosh,
sees you as a
okay.
failure?
God, you just suck, man. Like, oh my gosh. But I mean, yeah, on a real note, yeah, I mean, sometimes I do take it,
Yeah.
you know, really hard, and I feel like I'm a failure. And it's like, if I do end up in a state like that, it is really hard to pick myself up, because I do take it really hard on myself. Like,
Yeah.
you know, people always say, oh, it's not a big deal, you know, just, but to me, it is in that moment a huge deal, and it's hard to come back from one of those times.
No, yeah.
Interesting.
I definitely understand that, getting down on yourself. I have my own way of doing that, and I don't know. I mean, thank you for opening up about it. So
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, it was so hard, guys.
No,
All
I
right.
get that too with having FI. Like, just if anybody's inferior, you can honestly like find like, you know, some of their vulnerability behind
Yeah.
that, and it's just like, for me, it's like, am I being a good person? And that's a hard line to walk.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah.
always know I don't. Plain
Yeah.
and simple.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, how do you have like an active response to that kind of feeling, or where does that send you?
Depression.
Down the.
Yeah, usually, I don't know, I'm a fat kid at heart, so like a lot of times, I don't know, like if I get into like a depression like that, yeah, I'll just start eating a lot and then just make dumb decisions, you know.
Okay.
So
All right.
yeah, just that's when you really start seeing my like moral compass and like
Yeah.
how I'm like usually so driven. That's when you start seeing it fall away. So
Yeah, I guess because my brother is an INFP, so he has FI, hero, TE, inferior, and it seems to me like if he does get down on this, he gets very down on himself if he feels like a failure, or especially like if he feels like people don't respect him. But at the same time, it doesn't really lead him to like seek more respect. It more like causes him to like go back into himself, yeah, and kind of have this pride, I guess.
That's
Is
interesting.
the way that I see it. I don't know if that's exactly what you were saying, but
I mean, it usually, I mean, we are a little bit different, but
Right.
yeah, for me, what it does is, you know, like I'm a firm believer, you know, it's not about how many times you fall down, it's about how many times you get back up. So I go really hard on myself, you know, I beat myself up for it, you know, basically bring myself to rock bottom, and then I say, it's just like, how am I going to fix this? And like almost being at that rock bottom state that I like bring myself down to, that's where I find motivation to become driven and start like picking myself up again.
I think that's a healthy perspective to have on it too, because
Yeah.
I think and there have been times in the past, since I've known you, since like high school, where you do kind of get down on yourself and go inward. But to kind of have that perspective is almost counteracted that inferiorness of it and made it more aspirational in nature.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just when you're in a position like that, you know, you have to make the choice, like, are you going to sink or are you going to swim? And I don't believe in just like accepting failure and sinking, so
yeah,
gotta start swimming.
that's good.
Just keep swimming.
Famous words of Dory. There you go.
Ellen DeGeneres.
What?
That's who plays Dory.
No way.
Is
Yeah.
it?
Ellen DeGeneres.
You learn something new every day.
Internet, you have learned something.
That's whack. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Okay, so I guess we could talk about how you deal with relationships, or yeah, we'll talk about like, I guess, friendships first, that type of relationship.
Yeah,
but
let's
we
keep
can
it
talk about-
there. Yeah.
We'll start with friendships. How do you quantify, or like how do you decide how much you're going to value another person in your life or relationship that you have? What kind of qualities are you looking for in someone before you're loyal to them?
That's a good question.
Actually, that's funny how you worded it, because the big thing for me is just like I am an insanely loyal person, and what makes that like really close friendship is if I see that loyalty in someone else, if I think that they are gonna stick around, and if they're gonna be there when I'm in a tough spot, then I'm all in. Like that person, I make them as close to me as I possibly can. And then also with relationships too. I mean, kind of, because like loyalty is the biggest thing, but how I try to find that in other people is one thing I really like looking into is their past. It's just like, has this person gone through something that's really tough, and have they come out on the other side? And
Interesting.
if it's someone who has come out on the other side and is stronger because of that really tough experience, what that tells me is that they have really strong moral fiber. They're not superficial people. That there's a depth to them, and usually in those tough situations, I mean, it does usually boil down to the basics, and you usually can find like loyalty in a person like that. So
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
And that goes back to, I mean, ISFPs are like that in a sense, or that's how they operate, is that they are really, I guess, critical about their past experiences and how they reacted to those. And it would make sense that you would look at someone else's past experience to quantify what kind of person they are.
Yeah.
I guess kind of what you're describing reminds me of a compatible type for your type, which is like SFJs, ESFJs, and ISFJs. How do you view like an ISFJ that
Oh boy.
in terms of their moral fiber and how they put up with difficult experiences? Is that something that you find in that kind of person?
Well, funny you mention that, because I do know an ISFJ, and I think their morals suck. I mean, allegedly they're logical people and that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and I don't know. They're people. Me personally, with the ISFJ that I know, I mean, I just don't feel like I can have deep conversations with them. I feel like everything is superficial because they can't get in the deep feelings of things. I just feel like they think about everything logically, and I mean, there's only so much logic to go around. I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
The world needs a clarifier. It's his mom.
oh my gosh. I'm sorry, Mom.
That doesn't dox you. Anyways, no, I think...
I hate you so much.
I mean, it's not.
I'm sorry, Mom. I love you.
He does.
You raised me. I'm here today, so thank you.
I would say something with that is it becomes, because of the high SI, it's almost a formality at times.
Yeah.
And so it feels like you're stuck in the formalities as opposed to getting into a real situation. And I think that's what he's identifying.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, it also, and I've kind of noticed a similar thing with ISFJs, is that they aren't necessarily always that empathetic, I think, because they have it in their parent function. It's not like as important to them. And a lot of times their introverted thinking child could kind of take over and turn something into a logical situation. It's like, well, I mean, should I feel bad for you right now? I've definitely come into that same kind of situation with an ISFJ. So I think that it's a valid enough opinion for me.
Sick.
Tension around ISFJs here.
Yeah, I think we know from you,
Yeah.
Mr. Recently Single.
Let's talk about any blind spot. So,
Oh boy.
what are your experiences with not realizing what the future of other people could hold, what their intentions are?
Oh, I can't see him at all. Like, I mean, I think blind spot is a great word for that, because I like turn into a Helen Keller when it comes to something like that. So yeah, I have no idea what's going on. So yeah.
And you thought I was bad, folks.
That's me. Yeah, I'm
just
bad.
messing.
Yeah.
So I mean, like when something like that happens, where you didn't expect something to do something that they did.
Oh yeah, I just get whacked right across the face. Like it's just, it's so confusing, and like it actually takes me like a couple days to like fully realize like what just happened.
This is funny too with it, is that like I have any critic, so I guess I'm critical of everybody, which I think gives me this almost like heightened view. Or like, no, it definitely is like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
I don't know.
I'm judging. I'm being critical of everybody.
All right.
That's the thing. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so like there are lots of times when I'll tell him because I've deduced that somebody's like pulling the wool over his eyes, and
Yeah.
I'm like, this person's messing with you, and then he doesn't believe me,
Sorry,
and then he
no.
almost has
Yeah.
and then he like realizes it because they pull a one over on him, and then like.
Right.
I'm like, I told you that from the beginning. And
Right.
Yeah. And like even when it's properly explained to me, I'm still like, I don't get it. It's like an alien kind of thought to me. Like it just.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess I have two places. Well, my first question is it possible that you're less willing to be critical of other people's intentions when Cody brings it up because he's critical of everyone's intentions? Or...
That's a fair point. No, I'll take that.
I mean, yeah, I do think that is kind of a fair point. I mean, it's you've been right so many times to where I've kind of changed that now. Or like usually when you say something kind of along the lines with that, I'd be pretty stupid to not pay attention because I have no idea what's going on. But I mean, there is. I will say with that, like, there is a huge struggle with me because I do like being like merciful, and it's just like when like people screw up, I want to be caring, I want to help them and take care of them. Like I don't want to come down like a hammer and just say, it's just like, oh my gosh, you suck or something like that. But I mean, usually, with me being that forgiving, it leaves me like very vulnerable to just get like just whacked right upside the head.
Do you think it has to do with like you're already feel that sense of loyalty to them, or you feel loyalty from them?
I mean, this is something I'm really bad at, guys. So forgive me. But I mean, but kind of like what we were saying earlier about like what I look for in relationships is, I mean, if I have determined that that this person would be fitting or good and deserving of my loyalty, I mean, I go all in. So I mean, my loyalty is like unwavering and has no end to it. So I mean, even when things start going wrong, I will like still stick with it. And when something doesn't seem right, it's just like, okay, I'm still loyal and committed to this situation. It's just like, what can I do to fix it? How can I help? Like, why are you feeling this way? I want to work with you.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a huge weak spot and downfall that I have.
It's also a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't deny the good parts of it.
I mean, it can be, but I mean, it's also bad. I mean, if you're
undying loyalty is valuable.
I mean, yeah, but if you have undying loyalty to the wrong thing, I mean, you can end up in some pretty undesirable situations. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I would just say like every positive or every upside has its downside, and like some really good upsides have their fallout when they become a downside. I guess aside from that, we'll talk about introverted thinking demon or eighth function. So I mean, I guess it's a little hard for me to approach this because I'm not really sure how that would manifest, but
or at least got it so high in his functional stack he couldn't possibly understand how somebody can have it so low.
To be honest, it is actually kind of hard for me to like segue into talking about elements of an ISFP just because they're so like far from my functions.
That's interesting.
So like FI and SE, that's something that I like don't even really understand how those functions work very well. Stuff like that. So I guess for TI Demon, when you're in like a low spot, how does how does your introverted thinking, I guess, play into that, or how does it come out when you're in a bad situation?
I mean, I've he knows a lot of information on this, and like he's kind of helped explain it to me more.
Yeah.
But usually, what happens in this situation is like this is like my lowest spot. This is where I'm struggling the most, and like internally, I'm hurting and struggling to find an answer in anything. So what I try to do is just everything is so confusing, and I don't understand it that I try to make sense of it. So based on where I'm hurting, what I'm feeling, I try to pick pieces of information everywhere I can find it and try to come to a logical conclusion based on what I'm feeling. And what that usually tends to turn out to be is as you stated, like a logical fallacy. So it's not actually logical, but I convince myself in my mind that this is logical, and if it's logical, it makes sense, and that's right. And I get really confused, and it really just kind of sends me on a downward spiral.
And sometimes it's not even logical fallacies, because sometimes there's some logic put into it, and you can tell you've taken the time and thought to put in the effort. But it's not the right conclusion regardless of that fact, because you are just at like this low spot of like, you feel betrayed to some extent, or like you feel hurt, and so you're deducing the worst about people because you're a very optimistic person. But when you deduce the worst about people, you deduce the very worst that it could possibly be, or you just get stuck in this logical train of like how you're like, you just go to extremes is I guess the best way to put it, of like how you're a bad person, how somebody else is a bad person. It just has to be deduced that somebody's at fault.
Yeah, I mean,
a good way to describe it as well.
And I mean, a great point with that too is like, how I was mentioning earlier, like I try to see the best in people. It usually almost always boils down to the fact that I think that I'm terrible and I was the one who screwed up or messed up or made the mistake. It's almost trying to think. Jocko Willing put it this way: it's extreme ownership. So if anything goes wrong, if anything's like not going the way it's supposed to, you're the one in control of the situation, then it's just like you take responsibility for it. So like, let's say if I go through a really bad breakup and I can't find a reason why or what was going on, like, it always comes back. It's just like, well, then it was my fault. I was doing something wrong. I wasn't adaptable enough. I wasn't exciting enough. It's just, how do I got to change that? And then it's just, it's just a mess.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that actually kind of makes sense, being like an INTP and thinking about INTP superego. It's like trying to deduce reasons, TINE, of your experiences, introverted sensing of why you hurt someone's feelings, FE inferior.
Yeah.
So that actually does kind of make sense to me. Although, as an INTP, I kind of like experience the exact opposite. When I'm in a bad place, I'm like, these people, I can't make sense of it. I can't logically understand why someone would do this, so they must be evil, the worst. I hate them.
Yeah, it's usually the opposite for me. I like hate myself, and I'm just like, yeah.
So it's turned outward versus inward is kind of the contrast I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not always the case, but that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I always take it out on other people.
I was like, I hate other people.
I guess with that, we can just start talking about other types. So, let's talk about ESTPs a little bit. I know you've lived with an ESTP, and they're also an SP, so they are more grounded in the moment and with reality, but they have that more logic side and extroverted feeling side.
Y'all love to do mechanical work together.
Yeah.
That's a good start.
Oh gosh.
It's true.
Right.
I remember learning how to do an oil change with my stepdad, super drunk. It was amazing. It was a lot of fun. It went everywhere, but it was still fun. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
ESTP, or ISFP. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say about ESTPs? Any good things that you like about ESTPs or negatives that bother you?
I'd have to say ESTPs are probably the best people to party with. You know,
they're pretty good at that.
Yeah, they care about the experience. Everything is fun, even when it starts going south. You know, they know how to like put some sort of spice in it to make it even more memorable than it was before.
He's really good at that. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely great people to party with. So you know, if you're
Party with an ESTP.
that's right. Like, get your ESTP in line before you do like spring break. So that's gonna be a fun week. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess we could talk about. We haven't really talked about ENTJ subconscious or just ENTJs. Like, what your opinion of them?
I'm glad they made it onto me finally. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just messing around.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you want to start with ENTJ subconscious? Like how you aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about it a little bit. I mean, yeah, I mean, as my subconscious, you know, it's just like I always have this idea in my head that I want to be more like an ENTJ. You know, they're because I mean, like one of the biggest reasons why I want to be that type of like personality is based on like my biggest struggle. So like you know, as an ISFP, you know, like I'm mostly feeling, and like ENTJs, when they go in a tough situation, it's just like they don't feel when something's like that I experience is really tough, you know. They just go through it. It's just like, oh, that person doesn't like you. Well, that person sucks, and they just like move on. And like that's something I can't do. I'm just like, why doesn't that person like me? It's just like there must be something wrong with me. This hurts. Like, you know, I committed to this person. I was loyal.
Right.
And like all of it fell through. I have no idea why. And it's just like I get so caught up on something like that where like you can just plow through a situation just like, oh, people don't like me, sick. I don't like them either. And just keep going. And
I'm pretty unfazed by that.
Oh man.
yeah, and I mean they just like, you know, they seem dominant. They just walk into a room and it's just like they already own the room, and I'm in the back like still trying to figure things out, just like doing my own little job over here. Just, you know what I mean?
I mean, to be fair though, like I'm sure you've experienced at some point feeling like an ENTJ or a time where you've been more in that realm of thinking.
I mean, I guess you could. I mean, I guess kind of like a time I could think about that is, you know, when I was in the military, I, you know, was with the Navy before. Like I remember one time I got put in charge, and I got put in charge of everyone. So I had like no one to answer to. I just had to. It was a weird experience because like. I mean, it felt kind of good, but I basically turned into like a dictator, and I ended up resigning like about like not even a week later, and I just couldn't do it. I mean, you know, I was incredibly powerful at first. Things were like getting done. Everyone was listening to me because they were afraid of me. Life was good, but it wasn't sustainable. And I mean, because I ended up just making more enemies than friends, and I started getting super stressed out when like people weren't respecting me anymore. And the longer I was the way I was, the less people respected me, so it became more and more stressful for me. And it didn't work out. Like I like being in one of those kind of enforcer type of roles, but I'd rather do things like outside of the spotlight. Like if I'm in the spotlight and I have no one to answer to, I usually don't. Like I'm not very successful. I usually fall apart pretty quick.
I love it.
So
I mean, to be fair, I think I don't know. With experience, you could definitely get better in that area.
Oh, 100%.
A famous ISFP would be like Ulysses S. Grant, and like just knowing his history, that kind of actually makes sense with your experience, because when he was in charge with the Union Army, he was kind of cut off from like command that was over him, which he was pretty successful, but when it came to him being like elected president later on, then he did
tanked.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
You did tank.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you will have to say, though, I mean, it's just like when he was a general, I mean, he was like one of the most prominent generals we've had in history. I mean, he was great at that, but yeah, when he got to the point where he had no one to answer to, it just really kind of started falling apart. Like, great person, great person, wrong time, like wrong kind of position for him. I think he would have been more successful just staying as a general.
Because I feel like he could have capably done it, and I feel like any ISFP could.
Yeah.
It would take a lot of effort, but I don't think it's impossible by a long shot.
No,
So
I mean,
think
he does have leadership skills. I mean, like, he was a pretty influential leader, but I mean, it's just like it was just really tough with the timing and the environment that it was, because it's not military anymore that you're trying to relate to. It's citizens that, you know, like
politicians.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
different arena.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think ISFPs honestly do make really good managers, upper middle management, or even upper management. Another famous, it's not an ISFP, but an ESFP is Horatio Nelson, and I have a lot of admiration for that. And his INTJ subconscious really comes out on the battlefield too, but at the same time, he wasn't so focused on planning like you talked about. He was more confident in taking risks and stuff, which I think is a really good quality in SFP leaders.
I do like risk taking a lot.
I think it's interesting because I feel like they are really good, and this isn't to limit them, because I think they can also be like presidents and generals and all that stuff, but they're really good secondhand men as well. Yeah. And they're really good at like supplying the leader with everything they need to be successful, because the leader can't do it on their own. And so to have like that right hand man that can do the job for you that you are too, like, you can't do for yourself, is something I think of is really valuable, that I think ISFPs bring to the table.
Right. And I could see like an ENTJ getting too caught up in the details, where something like an ISFP would just be getting it done, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Do you have anything to say about INTPs? Or I don't know if I'm your only example of.
You really are my only example of an INTP. So.
That's true.
Reddit, we're talking to you.
Reddit's such a wonderful, wholesome site.
Yes,
I love
sir.
it. Yeah. Love you, Reddit.
Love you, Reddit.
But yeah, no, quite honestly, you are the only INTP I know.
Okay.
So I don't think I've ever met anyone else. I mean,
Right.
Still don't
I
know
haven't
what
met another one either.
I don't know what Julie is, but I don't think she's that.
She's not an INTP.
No.
But anyways.
Yeah. All right. I guess with that we could end the video. That was a good interview.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Thanks
Hopefully you guys like that. We brought him for some clout and views, so hopefully you like that too.
Thanks for vibing along with us, folks.
Yeah. Hopefully I wasn't a deadbeat. I don't think I was. So, yeah.